So, good morning, everyone. Happy May 2025. We are really close to the end of the year. This is our Cyrus end of year event that we do every year. And we're just really grateful to have you all here. Thank you to Brian Markentel, our wonderful friend and colleague in Cyrus, who is always there to answer questions, always there to support us with the end of year tasks and things to do. So, Brian, we're just really grateful for your support and time. For all of you, thank you for enduring another year of different waves that go on with CDE and all the initiatives that are coming our way. Brian is sharing the Padlet link in the chat at this time. And Brian, I'm going to let you just take it away right now and get moving. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate your time this morning. And thanks, everybody, for joining me. Again, I'm Brian Markentel, Vice President of SIRAS Systems. And today's agenda, I've got three main sections. We'll have 5-minute breaks between them. First section is going to be kind of an overview, review, and some of the highlights from the California Roadshow. I don't know if anyone was planning on going to the Ventura one. I was, unfortunately, it had to be canceled. But I did take the slide deck from that, and I incorporated a lot of that information into this one. But I highly suggest maybe attending them. If you haven't already attended one virtually or went to one down in LA or wherever they were, there's going to be a Madera one on the 20th. And there's links in this PowerPoint to all that information. Okay, so introduction stuff. We have a bunch of resources in the this PowerPoint. There's acronyms that we use often. There's links to support right here. I'll just leave these. These are all clickable links for when you're looking at the PowerPoint. There's some extra CalPads links in here. I highly suggest looking at the CalPads CDE Roadshow slide deck of materials. You can click that here. There's also an end of your roadmap, and then they have the end of your checklist, FAQ, and certification. These are all if you're new to CalPads, I highly suggest looking at these things. If you're familiar with CalPads, you may want to check on these and just see if there's any updates that you weren't aware of. Good information here. Are you on my list? If not, email me. Hopefully most of you are already. Do you have staff from other districts that you communicate regularly with? Make sure you have maybe a local list of your neighboring districts for like transfers and things like that. I do offer office hours for SEDS quitters, like everybody that's on the call today. Those are Tuesdays from 10 a.m. to 11. Most Tuesdays, every now and then I may have to cancel or reschedule one. This page right here on this link will take you to where you can join my office hour. There's also a monthly task list as a reminder, whatever month you're in during the year. It kind of gives you an overview of what you'd be looking for. And then here's the Happy Fox admin support. And again, our Happy Fox user manual admin support area, they're all under construction, and we're openly taking feedback on those. But hopefully they're getting a little more fleshed out, and they should be working a little better for you. But again, we're still using the Padlets as well. So reminders, personal information. Let's say somebody sends you an email within your local district, and they include the kiddo's name and date of birth. Now, if it's all within just your local district, typically those emails are behind a firewall. And so those communications can be inferred as relatively secure. But if you're going to take that information and you need Cyrus support and you're going to forward it to us, or you're going to email anybody that has a different domain or email domain than you, you're definitely going to want to replace out the name and date of birth with the ID before sending it over the wild, wild west of internet devices once it leaves your district network. So, excuse me, degree of support. They've been kicking the can on this one for a little while, but thankfully it's going to an end. We have to have it for sure by fall 1 of 25-26. So I know Jennifer's been giving great guidance on where to find support for degree of support. And you can find the field once it's been determined. It can be entered on the MI page. Don't remember if we added it by the IEP manager forms for you guys. It might be seen there, but typically you can find it on the MI page. And then here's a link to a help sheet from the CDE. Also, we're in the middle of IEP implementation. When you guys got your SSID list or when you're getting them from SELPA, those IEP implementation files that you download, if you go into SIRAS and click on search and then go to the SSID list, you can click upload SSID file, and that will allow you to find just those specific records. We also have some help links on that to distribute. But basically, um, this is, and then there's a link here. So this is a link to the search feature that you can find. And then it has the details about using the SSID list. And then here's a link for running service log ministry reports, which is this ultimately used for. One thing I would suggest though is that when you are uploading the SSID file and when you click on search or when it generates the query, double check the number of students it found so it matches the exact number of SSIDs in your file. If it doesn't exactly match, it might be that a student may have transferred to a different district or is now in the 504. Hopefully not. But if you find that some are missing, let us know. We can help find those records for you. And then one notable thing that we did add for the service logs is something called a school event, right? So when you're doing the process for IEP implementation, assuming you're using the service logs, it's not required, but it's very useful. Typically, you've saved your query into SIRAS. You can share it with the district, so and it can be shared with all users or just admins. So that way you can do the query of the students and then export the service minutes report and see where we are. Students that have less than 90% delivery possibly have a lot of service logs or have some service logs that haven't been entered in. So typically we get to the point where once all the service logs are entered in, then the percent totals that Cyrus is generating for you, hopefully it should look more like the actual delivery. And then one thing to keep in mind is that if you've been going to the meetings or the CDE office hours for that, they did talk about adding a situation where if a student went to, let's say, a school event, maybe a pep rally or something like that, at a time when they would normally be getting minutes, and they said that shouldn't count against us. So in response to that, we have something called a school event, so where you can log a number of minutes that the student would have been attending and would have been delivered had it not been for the school event. So using a school event allows you to reduce the number of minutes that were prescribed for that current time period. So keep that in mind. It's a new useful tool. SLP, code of FTE, if you've been hearing about this term, typically we suggest going into CalPads and running from the academic year 24-25. You can do revised and certified, and you can do the or you'll be doing it for end of year 4, basically, revised and certified, or you can look at LA approved from fall 1. But if you run the 1616 student services list, you can actually do research on which students have the SLP service in there from official numbers. Also another thing that's happening at the end of this year is that individual and small group instruction for preschool only is being phased out at the end of this year. So any amendments that are being done this year, or if you're trying to validate a record and it has 350, you may get a warning about the service being phased out. So you may want to search for all students that have it so that we can plan for phasing it out of the MI summary page, either through an amendment or the most recent annual review. But we keep that in mind that if we have services that carry over to the next year and we try to report plan adoptions or new meetings, it most likely would generate an error and it just would need to be removed. So reminders on integrations, we do support single sign-on setups. So if you are using SSO in your district and you're not using it to log into Cyrus, let us know because we can actually set that up for you. We also can integrate your 504 data with your SIS system, and then make sure that you're monitoring your integration logs. And we have an integration guide, and any Aries district should be monitoring logs from both Aries and Cyrus. Let's see here.
Brian, real quick,
Yeah.
pause. The Padlet is sharing that it is not able to be found. I'm not sure if maybe there's a password or something.
Let's see here. Maybe I miscopied it. Let's try it again.
Yeah, I think you're missing the K at the end in that second.
Oh, was that somebody else? Oh, you were able to download? Okay, let me do another one then. Oh yeah, you're right. There is a K at the end of that one.
Sorry, did I miss that?
There you go. Try that one.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
thanks. Yeah, no problem. That's good. Yeah, no, people can follow along. So, okay, CalPADS Flash Communications. If you're not getting these emails, they do come out every now and then. There's a link here where you can actually go to the main CalPADS Flashes page. Um, the most recent ones of note were Flash 300. It talks about doing reclassification, RFEP during summer. Um, there is the Flash 299. That's a reminder to view data discrepancies throughout the year. However, now that we have the snapshots in place, you can go directly to your certification errors. CalPADS Flash 296 talks about some updates to the SSID match tool. And then 295 is talking about resources available for families affected by the California fires. And our hearts go out to anyone, anywhere this last couple of years that's been affected by the fires, as we all have been. So, okay, so this is a new thing coming up in initials. And one of the things that we need to be aware of, or the staff need to be aware of when you're closing out an initial, in this case of when the parents aren't accepting the information that was presented to them. So let's assume a student was found eligible, right? Before we even get to whether or not they're going to accept the plan or the offer of FAPE, we still have to indicate, do they actually agree to the initial provision of special ed eligibility to begin with? And typically on the consent for placement form or a consent form, you're going to have an indicator um, that we don't normally look at in this. We just basically usually looking at decline the offer of FAPE, right? So we want to make sure that if they agree with the eligibility, well, then we can offer offer the FAPE, right? But if they don't agree to the eligibility, then it's kind of a non-starter because we actually have to report the initial evaluation as did not qualify actually, even though they were technically qualified. So it's kind of like a preemptive withdrawal, but it's a different non-participation reason. We don't turn it in as a withdrawal because a withdrawal implies that services and participation and eligibility was agreed to and started at one point, and then they withdrew eligibility, right? But this is like they're not even agreeing to it up front, so it's like a preemptively like that. So what does that look like when they're finalizing the meeting, right? Um, well, hold on a second here. What's going on? There we go. Okay, so when if they let's say that they do agree to the eligibility, then you'll see this under does not accept the plan, right? For an initial, right? And then you can pick eligible no education parent declined FAPE. Now, when you're looking at the meeting held, notice that we do have something called does not accept eligibility. So that is a new option that we see right there. So if that's the case, um, and they say no here, right? Then we're going to say do not accept eligibility. And then that's going to finalize as no consent for eligibility. So that's a new way that we're finalizing these meetings. So just keep that in mind that that's a new requirement. Also, something that came up, which is interesting. This is one of these CalPADS things where I'm not convinced it's going to stay this way for the next couple months because this seems like such a headache. But what they're saying is that as students are graduating with the diploma, thankfully it's not all completers, but just diploma. When they graduate with the diploma, we have to report that they're not eligible or no longer eligible, right? As a non-participation reason. So in the past, or for all exits, typically the guidance is to make the inactive date in SIRAS matching the inactive or the enrollment exit date in CalPADS. But for graduates with the diploma, they want the date in SIRAS or the SED system to report the SWIDS effective one day after their enrollment exit. So what that looks like is that if you have a student who graduated on, let's say, 1/17/2025 this year, right? If they in the summary, sometimes staff will take liberties on how what exit date they use, but normally it should be typically aligned with what you see in CalPADS. This example that I found, I was just randomly looking through training server, and I found somebody that had what I was expecting to see 117 here, but it was 110. But it doesn't really matter. The thing is that this date that they put in the exit summary or the date that used for inactive, It's anticipated that this student will exit from special education on. So in the case of all inactives, we typically use enroll and exit date. With now what they're saying with exceptions, if it's a diploma and their enrollment exit date in CalPEDS was 117, then they want you to put 118 in the exit summary, right? Or 118 in when you're making the record inactive in SIRAS and report it that way. But then if you do, you can't report that status because you may get a GER05 possibly because that date is one day after the exit date. So if that's the case, you may have to, hopefully they didn't do this, but you may have to temporarily remove the exit date to report it. I don't know. This just seems like a big confusing thing. Anyways, but let's just say that if you want to review your exit summaries, this is an easy way to do it. You can click on your search query criteria. You can enter a meeting date between 7/1/24 with no end date. Um, and then the meeting status is finalized, and then exit summary is the meeting purpose, and then active status is all in search. And then when you get that, you're going to get a list of students here, and then you click on choose students, this button right here. And then when you do that, you're going to get a list of kiddos. And then what you're going to do is in your exit summaries, look for all the ones where um, graduates from high school. Now, if you have ones that have already, and I don't have this data that I can review, technically speaking, I'll see if I can find an example district, but I would be interested in hearing back from you if you run this type of list and you see ones where you have a diploma that's before today, right, before May, earlier in the year, open up your 1622 report. And if you've exited these the normal way, in theory, what CalPEDS is saying, they won't be showing on your 1622. So if the exit, let's say the first example says graduated from high school in 12/20/2024. If that's what it is in Cyrus and the exit date in CalPEDS is also 12/20/24, CD is saying that that one probably won't show in the 1622, and you'd have to manually change this inactive. You wouldn't have to reopen the exit summaries, just leave them alone. But change the inactive date in Cyrus for the archive and resend it as one day later. I'm going to follow up with some emails in the next week or two on this with you, but just keep in mind that that's what the guidance was from the roadshow. And that's why I'm giving it to you now. I don't know if it's going to stay. Oftentimes these things change, but that's the best I can do for you at this
Brian?
point. Yeah, question.
Yes, question. We have a question from one of our participants. What if parents disagree with one eligibility criteria? So, example, they have SLD and they have, let's say, speech, and they don't agree with SLD, example, but agree with the other category and are okay with partial consent except for one of the eligibility criteria. So, for example, when teams find the student to be eligible with a primary and a secondary. So maybe they agree to SLD, but they don't agree to speech, or they agree to um, speech, but not autism, example. How would you mark that in Cyrus?
Well, how would you mark it in the IEP already? You'd notate it with notes or you document, you're not changing your procedures in the IEP manager, right? So at the end of the day, are you going to give the kiddo an eligibility or not? So if the disagreement is such that they're gonna allow ineligibility to be notated that they'll agree to, um, then it's going to be a local decision between you and maybe reach out to SELPA if there's questions on how the agreements are happening. But at the end of the day, if they agree to something, make sure that the documentation reflects what everybody's agreeing to. And then as long as that information makes it to the MI summary page, let's say that you did propose two eligibilities, parents didn't agree to one of them. How would you document that? Would you just change the eligibility that you came up with, or would you finalize? I mean, might suggest finalizing the meeting as does not accept the plan, or they agreed to um, and doesn't agree to the eligibility, and then you can lock in that meeting as is, so you can concretize the document where you say, well, we believe the kiddo has two eligibilities. Parent doesn't accept that at all. Open up another review. Um, and then manually fix the MI summary page with the eligibility that was agreed to, reopen the eligibility form, and in the other review, document the process of how the negotiation went to go from what you guys originally proposed that's been saved in your original documentation, not overwritten by extending the meeting. This is all up to you guys how you want to document it. Remember, Cyrus is a glorified Xerox machine. So if you want to have discrete events where you have record for posterity of what the original negotiation plan was, that's up to you if you want to keep that like I'm suggesting, or if you just want to get rid of it and take the eligibility that you came up with and remove it, and then there's no evidence of that other than maybe what's in the notes. So what you do with the paperwork is between, you guys and the family and SELPA. At the end of the day, when you're closing the meeting, whether you're going with no eligibility at all or some version of it that was agreed to, once that's closed, then Cyrus will report it either way.
I would think too, Brian, if they agreed with the primary eligibility, then that would be fine that they agreed with that. But then if they didn't agree with the secondary eligibility, that would be written in the notes.
Yeah,
And
however you
maybe,
want to document it. Yeah.
yeah, and that's where I would put it, if that helps, Armando. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think what Brian shared makes sense. To say the parent did not accept the plan, because then you create a record that you and your team felt strongly that one eligibility was more appropriate, right? And then, as Brian is saying, close that meeting, and then instead of having a continuation, because then that's what's happening right now is we're having all these continuation meetings, right? And then things get lost once things are finalized. Um, Unless it's very detailed in the notes, but that doesn't always happen. Um,
Thank you for
okay.
bringing that to light. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would highly suggest that if you have a meeting where that's getting complicated like that, reach out to us immediately and let us know because what we can do is depending on where you are in the process, it might be that a meeting's been closed too early or a meeting hasn't been closed yet. And if anything's going on weird with it, you give us an idea of what the intent is. And at the end of the day, as long as we can help you make the paperwork look like the way you want it. But if we're doing something funky like that, where they are partially agreeing, and then it's a high profile case, and you want really detailed documentation of each waypoint, each form, each version of the documentation for later, let us know, and we can make sure that once you're done doing all the magic in the IEP manager to get those signatures, however you get them, we'll help you on the front end how to report it to CalPAD. So we might have to do a little magic on the MI summary page. But at the end of the day, the biggest point I want to make is that once that meeting is closed, and we're trying, and then everybody's happy with the paperwork. If you're getting CalPAD's errors, don't touch the meeting. Don't reactivate the meeting. Let the meeting stay as is because we can do all the magic that we need to on the MI summary page to report what happened, even if it's in stages, right? We can help you with that. Just the last thing we want is anybody going, oh, I got a CalPAD's error. I have to reopen the meeting. That's never how we do it. Reopening meetings is risky. And if you need to do that, typically let us do it. So, all right. So on here, we got some deadlines. Snapshots are already in place. So you can be running your certification errors. We don't want to be getting close to the final certification deadline. And there's an amendment window. But we want to have all the posted CalPADS errors, which are the CIRAS do not reports, cleared by June 6th. We want to have all your end of year pending transactions sent by June 6th, no later than that. And our goal is to have LA approved during the second week of July. I know here in Santa Barbara, Jennifer has been sending the diligent reminders about we want to have all the submissions and errors closed by 23 because people are leaving early, right? So if we have any hope of getting the DRDP errors addressed, we need to remind staff who were doing this to transcribing of them to review the results. We posted the DRDP errors for you this morning, so you have those in there. And then I also got 2 links for overall Cyrus suggested due dates. And then there's a CalPADS calendar link here as well. Okay, so plan of attack for EOI 4. So this is something, it should be a review at this point. I'll just kind of see, going over it here. But we have this each twice a year. We have either fall one or end of year four, and we need to figure out how we're going to approach getting to LA approved. The goal is to LEA approve and then get SELPA certification on that. So how do we do that? What are the things that we can do? We got suggested milestones. You want to keep an eye on the things that are going to happen, and but we're going to kind of backwards plan. So we're going to try to do the LA approve in the second week of July. Let's work backwards. How do we do that? So we got to identify who are the stakeholders, who are the people that are going to be working on these reports, right? Have a planning meeting. This is part of it right now. We're having a planning meeting right now. I suggest having a local planning meeting within your district with the key players, right? Identify and assign the tasks, know what the data that you're looking at, know how to report it. Make sure it's going to get reported, and then reviewing the reports, and then understanding snapshots and how they work for LA Approve. Some of these, if you're not, some of these things are good to be reminded of because there are a lot of things that could happen to kind of waste time that we want to prevent, especially around the LA Approved thing. So this is a suggested milestones from the CalPADS EOI help. I think this is a good for review. Right now, we're kind of in the submit and post files and reviewing the IVR and certification errors right now. Key stakeholders. So typically in any district, you're going to have a SEDS data coordinator and an SIS data coordinator. Now, SEDS data coordinator is the SIRAS person. They're going to be working with program specialists, the SPED staff, SELPA. They'll be working with Jennifer, NPS coordinators, and then your CalPADS people are going to be working with the school site staff, district administrators, and any staff who are monitoring CSIS information. So do we know who our SEDS coordinator is? Do we know who the SIS coordinator is? And who are the main contacts for the IEP team? Who are the main contacts for the DRDP team? Because when we're looking at resolving errors, we may need to reach out to the IEP team, maybe to find meeting delay reasons, maybe to see if a continuation meeting date was changed to a continuation meeting, making it look overdue when it really shouldn't be, right? And then who are the main contacts for DRDP if we need to get some resolution on the errors? SEDS data coordinator. This is the person who's in SIRAS. They're going to be working with the IEP team. They do need CalPADS access to research and resolve the errors. If a SEDS coordinator or a SIRAS person doesn't have access to CalPADS, then they won't be able to send data. They won't be able to do any research in CalPADS for resolving these errors, and they're going to have to lean heavily on the SIS data person. Now, in the smallest district, that might be the same person, but on any decent sized district, we really need two people moving forward. And that's even in the CalPADS documentation about SEDS and SIS data coordinators. Technically, CalPADS is assuming that there is a dedicated SIS coordinator for your attendance system and a dedicated SEDS data coordinator for your special education data system. Now, the SIS data coordinator's got enough on their plate already, but they definitely do need to work with the SEDS data coordinator, especially around getting enrollment set up to and SSIDs created. Okay, so team agenda for your local meeting. You're going to want to review the end of your roadmap. And there's a link here, right? CalPADS has their own checklist that you can look at. And this is a very comprehensive checklist. You're going to want to schedule maybe at least a couple follow-up meetings, at least one. Check in with Jennifer and find out when you guys, if you want SELPA to help review some of your reports. If you're going to go to the May 20th or attend the May 20th virtual roadshow, maybe you guys can all meet in the same building and put it on a big screen, bring some popcorn. And then plan to get most of your open meetings. Find the unaffirmed meetings before staff are going on break to look and see if we can get those closed. And then if you have final errors that you're not sure about, you can schedule a meeting with me. And then also just a reminder, DRDP staff are leaving sooner than later. So we want to make sure that they're reviewing the errors now to get those resolved and make sure that there's no incomplete DRDP still left over. And then we need to get PSTS completed and reported as well. So we can assign some tasks. So when we're looking at the CDE checklist, that's a big, long, comprehensive thing, but we want to get those filled out. And don't forget, we need to send all events on or prior to June 30th, the end of the year. And we want to clear all the posted errors in SIRAS. Now, if you're listening to the CDE Roadshow, they may talk about finding unaffirmed IEPs. I got some links on that I'll show you in a minute. But they talk about the term do not reports. Um, CDE Roadshow more SACE focused, and so in SACE they don't have errors posted like we do automatically. So the SIRAS CalPADS errors are the temporary do not reports. If you have a record that's causing a file rejection, you don't need to manually make it do not report. The error that gets posted will do that for you. In SACE, they don't have that automatic thing. So they have to go into all the records that are forcing one of their files to not get posted. They have to manually go in and make each of those DNR. I think they have a batch edit so where they can actually find them and then set them all to DNR. But at the end of the day, they have to go back and find them and undo the DNR to try to send them again. What's the result? In Cyrus, you just click on that little X to remove the error, so it's a little easier. So that's the terminology that you'll hear. And it makes so you can better understand what they mean for Cyrus users, right? So this is what that checklist looks like. There's a responsible column, there's a date completed column, and then further down the list, there's the end of year 4. They have all these things right here. So make sure that you are looking at these and getting these things done. Okay, so what is EOI for? In contrast to Fall 1 is literally just only the students who are actively enrolled on Fall 1 or students who had a parent consent given to do an initial assessment before Fall 1, but the meeting will happen after. So end of year 4 is more comprehensive. It's all those students that were in Fall 1, um, as well as even if they left, right? Because now if they left, they still have enrollment for this year. And it's also going to be kiddos who were found eligible but never started participating, and students that were found not eligible. Um, Also the students that were just still active and continuing all the way to the end of the year. And then finally, they do include the post-secondary status. So it's a comprehensive count. The data is used for multiple things. It goes all over the place. And if you're looking at what is the data, right? So in Fall 1 is Fall 2 of these two things, but we're looking at end of year 4. Now, the reason I've blocked out work-based learning, WBLR, and SINC is that you may be tracking work-based learning in Cyrus. At the end of the day, your work-based learning results need to be entered into your student information system. So we've got a query, I'll show that in a minute, for finding work-based learning. And then your discipline incidents. Some districts may choose to put discipline incidents in Cyrus for review. Other districts may print out paper into a SPED teacher's cubby. However you're tracking it, though, make sure that the SPED team is being reviewed and asked, hey, did we get all the incidents in especially for the MPS kiddos? We want to make sure that they need to self-report those to your district, and then you can report them. There's a PowerPoint in the beginning somewhere about the MPS students. I think I may have it here. And then for end of year 4, specifically, these are the files that we're being turning in from Cyrus, which is SWIDS, meeting, plan, services, and post-secondary. So this is the more information about the incidents. This is that link I was talking about. So there's a PowerPoint that was made a year or two ago about getting a reporting from the Nome Public Schools. But definitely review your 717. Most districts shouldn't have any of these. If you did have a unilateral removal, typically the tongue-in-cheek description is, you guys would know it. There was probably like a local news reporter talking about what happened with this 717 incident. So most likely you just shouldn't have any, but definitely on, if they did, it should be well documented and understood what happened. Okay, work-based learning, this is high school only, so K through 8 will need to certify it, but typically your number is going to be 0 because it's not really applicable. It's only reported in EOI 1, but it can be entered all year long. And then our suggestion is that if you're filling out the information in Cyrus, you may want to do the search that we have, which is this one, which is you can search for work-based learning. So if you, do I not have it on here? Oh man, I thought I added it in here. Maybe it's later. But if you click on search and you go to add criteria and you start typing work, you'll see there's 2 options for work-based learning and classroom-based. You can search on those. Just make sure that your counts are accurate, and then any students that were found to be who did meet the criteria did get entered into your SIS, because data in Cyrus will not get reported. Also in the roadshow, they talked about tracking, and in the help sheet or the end of year checklist for CDE, they want you to track homeless and RFEP. So if you want to find any students that were on eligible and homeless, that had the homeless designation, I should say, you can track that in SIRAS. Now, technically speaking, the code 140 really only applies to legal parent guardian, but we've actually added a few other labels so you can track, father only, mother only, homeless, or just legal parent guardian. So if you're locally tracking this label, this is a useful resource for you. And then also for the RFEP dates, typically you can search for them between the data endpoints of July 1st and end of your June 30th, and you can find those kiddos that way. Sending data from SIRAS. When we talk about getting all the pending records, that's this area right here. So if you have a number of students with pending report status, all those events, since we're still in May, all these any pending records need to go. Once we get into July, then it's possible that the any July events are going to be blocked by the end of year reporting period block. So don't worry about sending any events that happen after July 1st. And then here's the do not reports, the CalPADS errors. So we make sure that these get to 0. Now, if you have any CalPADS errors or do not reports that are over a month old, email support and say, hey, I need to meet with Brian because we need to get those errors out of the way. Those errors could be directly contributing to records that look like they're overdue when they're not. Make sure you're reviewing all your CalPAD certification reports. And then the important thing here is that if you are not generating your certification or error reports directly in CalPAD yourself, after you know that your data from SIRAS is posted, and you're getting the error reports or certification reports sent by someone else who doesn't use SIRAS, it's really vital that you check when the certification reports were ran as of, because if the report was run prior to the last time you sent data from CalPADS or from SIRAS to CalPADS, then that report you got is not going to be very helpful for you. So how do you do that? How do you know about it? Well, if you're the one generating the report and you're going to end of year 4, you're going to look at the snapshot creation date, right? In this area, and then know whether or not you're LA approved or not. If you're using revised and certified, then you're going to be getting new creation dates all the time. And then hopefully this creation date and then the CDD run completion date time are all after when data was sent to CalPADS, right? If you are looking at the certifications directly, these are the good areas to know. There's the revision. We definitely don't want to do LA approve until we know all the data has been sent from SIRAS and that all the errors have been resolved. Now, if there's any errors in there or pending records that happen after July 1st, then we don't need to worry about sending about the data being sent because those aren't going to be going. But for sure, make sure all your June 30th or earlier events are sent, and they need to be included. Now, once we know that that's in there, then we can definitely start checking all of the certification validations and errors. We can know when SELPA has approved, right? And then then certification reports, there's the aggregate reports on the left, and then additional supporting reports on the right that for a review. So again, so this is how do you do that though? Well, if you're looking at the revision creation date time, and this also might be in a report that's being sent to you, look at the last time you posted data from SIRAS. So in this case, the data posted from SIRAS was on April 16th, 2024, and then the revision creation date of this revise and certify was April 25th. So when this report was being run on the 25th, it definitely included all the last data from SIRAS. Now, if you're the person reviewing these reports and you're looking at the CDD run completion time and it's still got these dashes, it means that while the snapshot was made, the errors aren't all done processing yet. So make sure you're not sending any reports to anyone or reviewing the reports until you see the CDD run completion time has been updated already. Now, when you're looking at these reports, right, and whether it's an error report or a student with disabilities by federal setting count, this revision date is what's going to tell you when the snapshot was actually created. So if you're looking at a 1613 or you're looking at a CDD error report and the revision date is prior to the last time you sent data, then you need to we need to either uh, get this report rerun or verify that you're not already on LA approved. Because when you go to LA approved, it locks in a revision date. And then if you're reviewing something like 1612 or 1622 on these reports here, make sure that you're clicking on that little plus sign to see the details in the plan. Or if you're running the 1622, make sure you're clicking that little plus sign right here to see all the differentiations on the statuses that are being reported on. When you're using the 1621, this one can continue to be useful. It's going to tell you students that have a SWIDS 1 in CalPads, but if you see that they don't have your district listed, it means they don't have a plan review, plan adoption set. Now, one limitation about 1621, I think, and for the SSID extract is that if a student has a SWIDS 2 or 3, they may not come up on this list. So it's always good for the new students coming in to do a review their record in CalPads directly, or potentially run ODS reports of the SWIDS data, and then compare that to what you have in SIRAS. I'll go more into auditing data later on in the presentation. But when you're looking in your end of your snapshot reports, these are the reports for incidents under end of year 3, and then these are the special ed reports that we would use for end of year 4 data that need to be reviewed. We do have a summary certification error report that you can use. Make sure that this is being accurately reflected by your latest snapshots. So when you're looking at revised and certified, this option isn't checked, but make sure that before you try to go to LA approve and check this little checkbox that, again, all the data is sent from SIRAS and all the errors have been resolved. So in summary, just keep working together as a team. Keep those communication lines going, make some deadlines and schedule them and adhere to them. Have at least one progress meeting, if not several, and just coordinate that the data being sent from SIRAS is being is that coordinate such that when you're running these reports that you know that the data from SIRAS has already been sent before you're running these error checks, right? So we can do it. If you're unsure about any of the deadlines, reach out to us. If you're unsure about anything at all, just send a email to support SIRAS Systems, and we can help you move forward. So, all right, do we have any questions before we go on a break?
And everyone is okay to unmute if you have a question.
I know it's a lot to a lot to go over.
Brian, what I have done for our leaders is created a kind of a month by month, similar to
Oh,
what you
good.
do.
Yeah.
And then each month I share out with our directors, what to pay attention to. So I usually glean a lot of information from your information and then bring it to them. And then, of course, the Cyrus Bulletin Board is really important to take a look at as
Oh,
well.
true, true, true.
Okay. I think we're marinating on everything right now.
You want to take a quick 5-minute break and come
Let's
back in a minute?
let's do that. Sounds good. And welcome, Maria. I know you just got here. We're going to take a quick break.
All right. Did you want to pause recording?
Sure. Sorry.
Okay.
Let me
All
do
right.
that.
We'll see you guys in about 5 minutes.
Welcome back, everyone.
Thank you, Jennifer. All right, so let's just get right into it. So we went over the overview, and now we're going to go over EOY data monitoring and end of year prep. And then after that, we will go into some procedures. So I would say, I know people are short on time minimally. The first two are really important. I think the procedures, there's a lot of good information in there. Hopefully you can stick around for that. But definitely this is being recorded, so. And I understand, I know when I'm going a little bit fast, but there's just a lot of information to cover. So this section, what I'm going to be bringing over are slides from the Spring Roadshow slide deck, where they directly are talking about things that you need to do in your said system. In this case, you guys are using us, Cyrus. So I'm breaking down these slides for you. So if you already watched the Roadshow, or you're going to be watching it on the 20th, you can refer to this PowerPoint and the way that we broke it down on how you could do SIRAS versions of what they're asking. So this particular slide, they have 5 different things that they're having you look for, right? LRE, parent involvement, uh, last and next plan review and parent consent dates, and then transition indicators. So that said, if you're looking for the LRE fields, which is typically your program setting and general percentage, you can use these data monitoring lists. So if you go to reporting, student lists, click on predefined lists, we have our data monitoring section. Now, notice that there are buttons on the left and then little magnifying glasses on the right. And so if the button has a magnifying glass on the right, what that means is if you click the button, it's going to automatically do a found set for you. The one exception is the special ed program data, right? If you click on that, it's going to be whatever your found set is. Now, if you want to use any of these lists, but you have your own found set of students that you want to use, that you want to look at, and you don't want the default query to override it, then use this little checkbox here. You see it says most of the predefined lists include a search query. If you click this checkbox, then it's going to not automatically overwrite your found set. So this is how you can review this data. And when you click on the list, you can sort by percent in gen ed, you can sort by program setting, you can go in to modify the list and make it a table, and you can really start looking at the data that way. Now, if you're looking for next and last plan review dates, you can look at the previously overdue is one way you can do it. This is where you can find records that were already overdue, or you can do the current overdue. It's a DINC 1. And then you can see which ones that have a next that's already passed. That means that they're currently overdue. If you have a next that was done late, then the DINC 1 previously overdue will help you find those. And these are useful when looking at the 1621. Now, if you're looking for parent consents, maybe for pending students, that's what are under the same data monitoring list. We have new referral list, right? So this is predefined list data monitoring. So if you click on the new referral list, that will help you find the records that may have recently got a parent consent. We may need to send a pending as of. Transition indicators can be found by looking at the DINC 4 list. This is going to find students that have missing TranReg or non-compliant TranReg answers. So there's a slide. This is also from the CDE slide deck where they're saying save and lock all APs and amendments. Technically speaking, that's the same thing as closing meetings in SIRAS. Now, there's a number of Now, this is the SIRAS version of it, right? Find open meetings, finalize or abandon, right? So it's possible that you can there might be situations where they don't accept eligibility. There might be situations where they don't accept a plan. There might be situations where they don't accept a plan, it's an initial, right? And then maybe we got situations where it's unresolved to be continued, where maybe there's just nothing we can do, right? So, but at the end of the day, we're looking to try to close the low ones where we can easily accept the plan and confirm and get these things reported. Now, if staff are indicating they can't click meeting held, right? There's a number of things that we can do. But how do we find them? You can click on the meetings in progress, open past date. We've also got under the predefined queries, you've got the leftover meetings and multiple open meetings. But let's just say that you're looking at all these different reasons here. When would we use unresolved to be continued? Let's just say that you have a meeting that's been going on forever, and it's not a let's say it's not a plan review, it's not a triennial, it's not an initial. Say it's an other review or any kind of amendment. These ones, if you want to get them closed for the summer, and you want to reactivate them later, possibly you can use this one. But typically speaking, if you're having trouble closing a meeting, are you guys documenting the contact attempts? Are the teams documenting the contact attempts? Because each district, you should have a local policy of how long you'll wait before you close a meeting. Technically speaking, meetings shouldn't be open longer than 45 to 90 days at the most. Once it gets past 90 days, the meeting starting to become a potential liability on how you're tracking the documentation of the waypoints in the meeting, and potentially not reporting a meeting that, like a plan review or triennial, where CalPERS thinks that they're overdue. We let these meetings close, right? Now, how do you, now if it's a meeting that just can't close, um, first of all, they're not going to be rolled over and the grades won't be advanced on them. But let's just say that you have a meeting that's been scheduled for next year. It's going to happen after June 30th. It's already showing as overdue in CalPads, but you want to tell CalPads that, hey, we have a meeting planned, right? And the meeting's not going to be before June 30th. Well, that's where we use the pending as of. So what pending as of is going to do, you go to the MI summary page, and then you can click on the archive and you click pending plan meeting. Now make sure that the date that the meeting was opened is what the reporting event date is, because this gives us a date that's within end of year, right? Now, if the meeting is planned for later in July, we don't want to try to say, oh, it's a July date, right? Or you don't want to see a future date here. You want to see this with, hey, yeah, as in May 6th or whenever the date is before June 30th, we have a annual already open or a triennial already open. This doesn't work for other reviews. Um, right, this is only for annuals or triennials that are already in process. Other reviews are an amendment. That's not what CalPERS is looking for. So once you click then archive and report, you'll get a pending as of, and then at least even though the record showing is overdue in CalPads, if your FUMP is reviewing these, they'll see that pending as of, and they'll go, oh, okay, we know that you guys already know you're overdue and you already have a meeting in progress. That's how you can signal to CalPads that you're working on it. Now, if it's a meeting that has a date prior to June 30th, and there's just no way you're going to be able to close it, hopefully that's not the case, but in some cases you can't get around it, definitely for sure send a meeting in progress. And what this does is it's going to see, oh, we have a triennial or annual review in progress, and you have a meeting date in place. So when you archive the meeting in progress, the report event date should be the same as the meeting. And this will just minimally report the meet only. It won't report the plan because obviously it's not been agreed to yet. Otherwise, we would have been able to close the meeting. But this will allow you to report that the meeting did happen. So if it's showing as overdue, this is how to get it off your overdue list by sending a meeting in progress. And the meeting doesn't even have to be held yet. Okay. Now, in this CalPad slide, they said review any students marked as do not report, right? And this is a SACE focused slide, right? So in SIRAS, all that means is which records have these CalPads errors, because these are temporary do not reports. So if you have CalPads errors left over, or now you're going to see more of them today because they're going to be some of them will be DRDP errors, and one DRDP record could potentially have anywhere from 1 to 30 errors potentially, or a lot of them. But anyways, these are the ones are temporary do not reports, and we need to get these all cleared. If you don't feel that you can get all these errors cleared before the end of May, let us know. We can start working on these. And we don't really want to have these errors that are over a month old. If you have errors that are over a month old and they've been sitting that long, I highly suggest emailing SIRAS support or support at SIRAS Systems and ask for a meeting so we can review them and get them resolved. The CalPad slide is review all your students are properly exited from special education. I'm going to review this information. So there's two reports that you can use in SIRAS. If you are in the query, monitoring query is the inactive records requiring archive. That's on the left. What this is are records that they have been made inactive in a way that SIRAS goes, hey, that's a reportable exit or a reportable inactive reason, I should say. It needs to be sent to CalPads. But it hasn't been archived yet. So using this button on the left, you'll be able to find a list of records that have an inactive reason, but they haven't been archived yet. So we need to figure out, A, is that inactive reason accurate? If so, we need to archive it. But if the inactive reason is not accurate, maybe somebody accidentally put some data in or they put an inactive in when they didn't really understand what it was, we may need to clear it out. But if the inactive reason is valid, we need to archive it. Now, that said, how do you find the records that are already have all the records that are going to be reported this year or should be reported? Well, if you go to reporting student list, you go to predefined list under the predefined the data monitoring predefined list, we have something called reportable exits. And what this will do is this is going to find all the kiddos that have the inactive reasons that are reportable for this current year. This should be in alignment with a lot of the records that you see in the 1622 report. Now, the time to be running this reports are now because we're before June 30th. If you are reviewing these in July, it's possible that these records, these buttons may not work properly because once we're in July, Cyrus is going to think you're looking for the 25-26 school year, and we're not. So we got to run these while we're still actively in the 24-25 school year. Now, this CalPADS roadshow slide talks about reviewing your SSID and local ID fields. Local IDs are technically your SIS IDs. So when you're creating records new in Cyrus or you're getting records that come from another district, typically the student ID may still reflect a generic created Cyrus ID where it's got a mixture of the name, partial name, and date of birth. We suggest updating that to your local SIS ID. It makes it easier for you to find and easier for to search. They want you to review transition services, right? This is basically our DINC 4 that we talked about earlier. So make sure that you are finding them. Also, if you're in the compliance concerns, there's a check mark where find only records with delay reason missing. I'm just noticing that here. That wouldn't really apply to TranReg, but if you're looking at like currently overdue, if you're finding that you're reviewing the same records over and over again, you really only want to look at the ones that don't have a meeting delay reason yet, then this option is useful. They want us to find students for MPS, where you're going to look at the school of attendance, primary residence, percent in general ed, program setting, all these things. The way you can do that is do a search. And there should only be a small number of kiddos around the county that are in this situation. But in order to find them, you can do a search like this, and the way I do it is I click in the add criteria and I type the word school and I copy it, and then I paste it in there. Once I type in school, I can then select school type 3 times, and then I choose these 3 different types of school types, and then I do search to list. And make sure you're using or, because if you use and, you won't get any results. So use the or. And then once you get these students, then you could do something like use the special ed program data. You can go to general list and you can review their services if you're looking for those things. So once you have your found set, then you can use the predefined list to look at the different data points that you're trying to look at to make sure everything is okay. Now they're saying, they're saying compare students in your SED systems against your student information system, right? This is why we have integrations, because if you're monitoring the daily reports from integrations, you can find errors in Cyrus, like, hey, there's a Cyrus record that's active in Cyrus, but we're not seeing the information coming from the SIS, right? Or if you're monitoring your SIS data import logs, they may say, hey, we've got a kiddo who's active in our SIS, but we're not seeing a record from Cyrus, those kind of things. Another way to do it that's more time tested and more hands-on is that you can extract files from Cyrus, you can extract files from your SED system, and then use a VLOOKUP to compare the two. Typically, this is a standard Cyrus power user technique where you're manually looking at data from both systems. At some point in the future, we're looking to have more processing and support power for Cyrus to where we might be able to start adding this feature in newer areas of Cyrus. At some we don't have that yet at this point. We're bought up by Google, unfortunately. Had we might have a lot more tools. But anyways, this is something that is a power tool. It's Excel that has this information. So if you're looking to do this, hopefully your SIS coordinator already knows how to do these type of techniques. This is definitely something you can discuss in your end of year 4 meeting. If you're not already doing that, you might want to set up a way to share this information in your district. But one way to get data from Cyrus to compare to your SIS is use the student data tool, the student data export. So once you have this data file, it's got things like status pending and active and inactive. So if you see that a student record is active in your SIS system, but you're not seeing, and you see them matched in Cyrus, but you're seeing that the export status or the active status is pending, that might be a follow-up one where they're actively enrolled, but they're still pending in Cyrus. You want to make them active. So that's the kind of visualization you can do. You can you can filter on the SIRAS statuses of these records and say, hey, all the active records, that should be matching what's in the SIS. The inactive records shouldn't be seen as coming in from the SIS as being inactive, that kind of stuff. So you're looking at the data from two standpoints, SIS, SEDS, bring them together with the VLOOKUP, and then you can have a lot of information, right? So you can also pull reportable exits. So this is what they're saying. You can report all your reportable exits, and then you look at your SEDS system where you do ODS SWIDS extracts and make sure that these are in alignment, right? So oftentimes the data extracts are your key tool in auditing data between your SEDS system, your SIS system, and CalPads. This topic can be really a whole hour-long presentation. I know I'm just glossing over it, but I just wanted you to be aware of the tools available at your disposal. Now, in the CalPads Roadshow, they talked about the review pending meeting types. This is also our new referral list. If you click on this link right here, it'll take you to instructions on how you can use the new referral list. These are monitoring typically your initial evaluations in progress. This is just a reminder about using documenting your discipline incidents. Typically, they're in your SIS. If you happen to have them in SIRAS, they're handy to be a reference for your IEP team in case having them in SIRAS makes it easier for them to review. You may already have a local system for distributing that information within your district, so you can keep up with that. This is a reminder in the post-secondary surveys. If you're looking to see what surveys have come in so far, you can go to predefined list, data monitoring, click on the post-secondary list, and this will show you all the kiddos, all their information, all the survey options that have come in so far. And then just as a reminder, we don't typically send the data until we've got all the survey answers in. And this next screen here, this PSTS data required blank, this is the button you want to get down to 0. If you're getting records who are in this query, but you know they don't need a post-secondary survey based on what you saw in CalPads, then the way to get them off this list is to actually get the inactive reason and inactive date in SIRAS squared away with what you see in CalPads. So this again is they're talking about auditing information between your SIS and your SEDS for the students who graduated. This is that slide I talked about earlier. They have to have an effective date 1 day after the enrollment exit. But this is where you can do the reportable exits, and then you can modify this, or you can do a similar query just to find your graduates. But I think this is going to be interesting. There's a CalPads office hours today at 3. I'm going to be monitoring that to see if they're talking about this, because I think this is going to cause a bit of a hubbub, because people are used to entering in exit dates to be in alignment with CalPads and then purposely make it 1 day after. That's not normal. So who knows? If I have more updates on that, I'll let you know. When you do click that list, though, you get a list of the name, SSID, school attending, the last IEPs, date, inactive reason, inactive date, archive reporting status. You can export that, and then you can compare that to your SIS information. That's what they're suggesting that you do. But you also have access to review it here in the SIRAS list. Note the archive reporting status. Remember that button I said about records needing to be archived for the inactives? You can look those ones when you find them. You can, if you're reviewing them in this list, you can see what their archive reporting status would be, that they don't have one. Okay, so this short list of exit codes, the best place to review this information to determine whether or not you need to report something to CalPads because of an inactive reason in SIRAS is on our, I'll go over this in the procedures a little bit, but we have that spreadsheet that says appropriate exit reasons and non-participation status. So when you're reviewing that spreadsheet, you're going to be looking at these type of exits, and then the spreadsheet will tell you, does the inactive reason or does the exit reason from CalPads that determines the inactive reason in SIRAS, if they have a different SWIDs other than one listed on the right-hand side of that column, it means that we need to report the inactive reason. If the exit reason, like moved and known to be continuing, whatever the version of CalPADS exited that indicates that they're not indicating an implied status change, then we don't need to archive that. But these types of exit reason CalPADS, when we're making them inactive in SIRAS, these are all indicating a change of SWID's status. So these are the type of, when you see this exit reason in CalPADS, when you're making them inactive in SIRAS, we're going to be archiving those, right? And this is a reminder about post-secondary follow-ups. This is that same button I was telling you about. And then they want you to know about work-based learning. This is the query. I think I could have had a copy of that earlier in the presentation, but here you go. If you were to type in the word work and add criteria, this is what I meant earlier, that you can see the work-based experience and then classroom-based work exploration. You're going to search for either of those being yes, and then make sure that your SIS has this information entered into it if they met their criteria. Okay, so these are some of the things we're going to go over in end of year preparation. First off, post-secondary surveys, we talked about those, but I got to remind you, we just got to get this down to 0, get these done. And then here's the list, right? And we've got links for before rollover help. We've got links for next year's data help and then rollover contingencies. We have a link about how we advance grades. So what is going on? All right, well, when we get close to the rollover date, actually July 1st, that first week, we will automatically do the grade advance for 504 and SST records, but only active status active records will be advanced. If the active status is pending or inactive, they won't be rolled over, have the grade advanced. Also, records with open meetings dated in the past will not be advanced as well, but records with open meetings with no date or future dates can be advanced. Here's some exceptions. So since we're only doing active status active records, right? Some of the contingencies that might come up are, what about ESY students? So right now, unless we hear otherwise, Santa Barbara is scheduled to roll over the last Saturday of July. If you guys want, if any of the districts would like the SELPA to roll over earlier, I would reach out to Jennifer and say, hey, we were looking, could we get something earlier than July 26th? I think it is the last weekend. If you guys, if any of your districts are starting earlier, like early in August, you may want the rollover to happen sooner. So petition SELPA if you want it to be earlier than that, and then let us know. But when the thing is that when the roller happens, if it's happening earlier in July and the roller is happening during your ESY, or if it's happening before you've done LEA approve, you may have ESY records that you want to stay in your district. Let's say you're a junior high and you got some ESY kiddos that are supposed to go to the high school district, but you don't want them to go just yet. Make those records pending. Then they won't get rolled over. And you can manually push them to the high school district once rollover is done and you've finished ESY. I'll show you that in a minute. The other exception is, let's say you have a fatal error and the student record's about to go to another district of the rollover, but you're not done researching the error. Maybe there's a meeting that you need to close or an amendment that needs to happen to fix some kind of whatever the error was. But if you don't want that record to transfer to the other district when we do the rollover before you're done LE approve, also you can make that record pending. That way, when we do the rollover, you can continue to work on this record, fix the error, report the data, and then once you're done fixing that error, then you can go to the next year's data area and click the advance button, and I'll show you where that is. So now if you're looking for, let's say you're the high school district or you're a district that gets students that come from feeder districts, you can click on the home button and then you can click on the incoming students. Now there's two buttons here. There's the incoming students and next year preview. Incoming students is just going to show you the ones where they're not in your district yet, but your district is listed as next year's district. Now, the next year preview will show you a combination of your current students and all the incoming students. Now, these are useful for doing projections. There is a predefined list where it says next year's data, only with potential changes. When you click on this, this is the one where minimally something's changing about like the school or the district, right? Or it has next year's providers different than current. So this is what you can review. Make sure that if you are a feeder district, minimally fill out where the student's going to in next year's district. Once that's done, the other district can go in, they can fill out the specific school, they can fill out the specific providers, they can fill out the specific services and whatnot if they do a transition meeting on them. Okay, on the IEP forms though, if you're doing transition meetings, maybe the student's not leaving your district, but they're going to a different school because they're going into kindergarten. When you're filling out the record of changes to IEP or the next year's data form, if the providers want to see a different school or the providers want to see who the next year's providers are, then the SEDS district coordinators need to do minimally update that information in next year's data. All the other information can be set by the IEP team, but if it's a different district, if it's a different school, and there's different set of providers, just make sure that that minimally is filled in for those transition meetings. Then the rest of the stuff that can be filled in on the form. Oh, also, um, I'm going to give you a preemptive warning. You may need to look out. Did anybody have meetings last fall where we saw that next year's data or revisions to IEP were being filled in fall meetings? That's not the intent of the next year's data form. Typically, the next year's data form revisions to IEP should only be filled out during spring, where the intent is, hey, these are the services that are going to start after summer. We've had some unfortunate situations where people have to spend time fixing data because somebody mistakenly filled out the revision to changes and let's say September, then the district had an annual in May, and then all the services that were determined in the May annual then got overwritten by the old services because of the next year's data form that was filled out the previous September. So just be on the lookout for those.
Brian, it might have happened if districts were having transition meetings early, in conjunction with their IEP.
That's fine. Just don't fill
Yeah.
out the change of IEP form
Yeah.
for next year's data. Because sometimes if you're in the fall and you see, oh, revision of changes for next year, that doesn't mean January. That means literally September or summer of the following academic year or prior to the academic year. So that's the intent. So these are the rollover dates that we've had so far. We can right now, you guys are scheduled to be rolled over on the 26th unless you guys want to go earlier, but these are the dates that are available. And on the before rollover page that we linked, we'll have this live updated. Okay, I talked about ESY, right? There's a couple of things you want to know about. Eligible for ESY, once it's checked, it stays there. So that's a way you can easily know a set of kiddos who are potentially going to take ESY each year. We don't touch that. But each year, what we do is clear out enrolled in ESY. Now, we already cleared it out for this year. So if you're filling it out now, then any student that you've confirmed for ESY in 2025, you can use the enrolled in ESY. So you can have a list of candidates for ESY, and that's your eligible. But then once you've confirmed they're going to be in ESY, then you do enrolled in ESY. So this type of in these data entry points will allow you to categorize the students and keep track of them that way. Oh, and then also you can go to your setting and transportation. If you need to arrange ESY transportation, then you know that you're only going to be looking at the kiddos that are enrolled in ESY, and then you can go do the transportation forms if you guys use that in your district. Also, tools available are if you click on search and go to predefined queries, we have the ESY eligible or enrolled button. That's basically the search I showed you. And then if you go to predefined list and you go to data monitoring, you can also click the ESY list where it actually will invoke the query of eligible, and it'll show you a list of the information that we have predefined for you. So these are useful, right? Okay, so I mentioned that magic button where let's say you had to make some kiddos pending so they didn't get transferred away from your district while they were in ESY or you had an error, and now your ESY is done, you fix the error, and you're ready to allow that record to leave your district and go to, you're the feeder district, and now they're going to go where they need to go. If you go to next year's data, you'll see all the next year's data listed. You can ignore the create button there, but at the bottom of the page, you'll look for the advance and apply next year's data. That button, you're not going to be wanting to use until sometime in August or later July if you do an early rollover. Okay, questions? I don't know if I went a little bit slower, or maybe like 0.1% slower. I
Oh,
know
it's
it's a
cool.
lot.
I just printed the PowerPoint, so I'm making notes on my PowerPoint.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah,
We can take another break if you'd like, or we can press on.
maybe like 3 minute break for
Yeah,
everybody.
sure.
Everybody
Perfect.
okay? Yeah.
Cool. We'll see you in 3 minutes.
Okay.
I don't know if we want to pause or not, but we could. Jennifer, welcome back, everybody. All right, we're in the final stretch. And there's some little graphics in there that I hope will be helpful to illustrate some of the concepts that we have. But we got a couple things I'm going to go over. Overall concepts, onboarding. That's like what do we do when students arrive? Offboarding. What do we do when students leave? And then talk about some data audits, and then enrollment help. And then finally, we'll look into some errors and error procedures. So when we're looking at SPED data or SWIDS data, there's four key factors involved. There's eligibility, participation, meetings, and enrollment. Now, when we're looking at things like eligibility, question is, are they eligible? Yes or no? Or is something changing in the eligibility? So establishing eligibility or changing eligibility, those are things that we would report. Same thing with participation. Are they participating on an IEP or ISP plan or IFSP plan in your district? Are they not participating, even though they live in your district? Or is the participation status changing? So establishing participation status or changing a participation status, those are things we would report. Now, meetings, we just report them as they happen, or if it's possible to add them if they're missing. Maybe a student moved out of state before we did the SPED to SWIDS rollover, and the status in CalPADS is SWIDS 3. Now they've returned. There's no old meeting information. There's archived information, but we may need to report older meetings. So we can report that. We have tools. And then the fourth thing is the enrollment. Is there any? You may have students living in your district not participating, but they're not enrolled. There's really nothing to report in that case, other than if um, they moved into your district, but they're not going to enroll, then we would want SWIDS 3. But maybe they enrolled in your district and they did enroll in a public school or even a private school, and they're not participating. We need to change status from eligible not enrolled to eligible not participating. Those kind of things. But with these records that we report to CalPADS, whether it's the SNR from your SIS system or the SWIS Meet Plan service records, a story can be told about what's happening. The plan adoption is the story that the student arrives with. An exit inactive reason being archived is a story about a student leaving or stopping participation or being found no longer eligible. These are all stories that we understand what happens in the field, but how do we translate that into the data? So typically, if SIRAS and CalPADS don't know the correct story or they're out of alignment, that's where errors can happen. At the end of the day, we need to really talk to the IEP team to find out what the actual story was. So onboarding, right? This tells a story of all the kids who are actively enrolled in your district. If any of them are showing us SWIDS 1 and CalPADS, but they don't have a plan adoption, they'll probably show up in this list with a different district showing, and that different district is going to be the last district to send a plan for them. So typically that's one way to identify plan adoptions that we need to send. And we have a Happy Fox guide for new returning students, which is a work in progress. Now, onboarding procedure, right? So typically, when they first arrive, we'll make them pending because we haven't confirmed those enrolling. But if we know they're going to enroll, then we want to make sure to update the district enrollment date on the MI summary page and click archive reporting. This will make a plan adoption and will automatically make the record active for you. Remember, active status in SIRAS is a way of telling SIRAS that we've confirmed they're eligible, they're actively enrolled, and they are participating. If you don't know all three of those, they should not be active in SIRAS. If we have a situation where a student is enrolled in your district and at a private school, but they're not on an ISP, but maybe they're having a follow-up meeting. And if they're enrolled in they're living in your district, they're eligible but not participating. We would not expect to see a private school enrollment, because private school enrollment typically is for either getting SSIDs for a one-day enrollment or indicating to CalPADS that the student is on a parentally and district approved agreed to ISP plan, right? Um, but if they're living in your district and not participating, then technically they should be inactive in SIRAS with a non-participation status of cessation of services. Now, if your district wants to do a triennial because the parents requested it, or maybe it's a local district procedure that you're following, you can make the record pending like this. This is another use of the pending status, but leave the inactive reason in place. So that way SIRAS knows the student's not participating, so that if you have a plan review or you have a triennial, SIRAS will know to only report the meeting, right? Okay, so students arrive all the time. The child find, we got to make sure that they are found once they're arriving. You got to do some research. We've petitioned CDE to make the SSID extract show when kids are SWIDS 2 or 3. Maybe they will at some point, but currently they only show if they're SWIDS 1. So you may have to do ODS extracts to find kiddos that arrive eligible, not participating, or eligible, not enrolled. Now, if you enroll them in the public school and the SWID status is 3, you will get an error. So those are easier to find. But if they arrive in your district and they're SWIDS 2, there's not going to be an easy way to find that unless you're doing ODS extracts or literally looking at every kiddo coming in CalPADS. So that comes back to the data auditing techniques where you can do ODS extracts of all the kids who are enrolled in your district and have a SWID status. And then you can filter through the SWID status and see if you're finding any kids that are SWIDS 2 or SWIDS 3 and verify that they're in SIRAS correctly. And if they're enrolled, they definitely can't have SWIDS 3. They either got to be SWIDS 2 or SWIDS 1. What that means is they're enrolled in your district at a public school. They're either SWIDS 1, eligible and participating, or if they're eligible not participating, that's okay. But we can't have them as eligible not enrolled, SWIDS 3, if they actually have an enrollment. That will be an error. So I know this may look silly, but I tried to make something memorable to make a brain worm, so to speak. So you remember this, but kids are arriving all the time, and they can arrive eligible, they can arrive not eligible when they participate. So think of yourself like a set square, kind of like mission control. You've got uh, people that are arriving into your local area. You need to have a process. Are we finding out, are they eligible? Are they not eligible? So once that's determined, typical scenarios that you have the intake process, they arrived eligible, and they're going to participate. And so we're going to send a plan adoption. And what that looks like is that they get here and then they kind of go into an orbit. So when students are participating, I think of that like they're in your local orbit and there is an inertia, right? So if they leave, we need to let CalPADS know that, hey, they left our orbit. And there's eligible not enrolled or eligible not participating. Maybe they moved out of the country, or they went to a private school, or maybe they stayed in your locally enrolled, but they're no longer participating, right? So, but let's say that they arrived eligible and participating. They arrived at your district on 3/1, and you can see they're eligible and participating. And in your 1621, you'd be seeing the previous district listed, right? So if you found that, then we need to get the record in SIRAS, update the MI summary page in the incoming plan, and then by sending a plan adoption in alignment with your enrollment start date here, it sends a new plan, and then this is what's going to clear in SCNR 0606. Now, we haven't seen the last of these. We may see a few of them, but in the fall, we're going to get deluged with them potentially. Just keep that in mind. But there could be another situation. Let's say the kiddo arrives, they go through the intake process. They're not withdrawing, but they're definitely not going to participate. So in that case, instead of being out in the orbit of participation, I now have a little indicator, like a local dock, where they're not participating, but they could start participating anytime. They could get launched back into the orbit of participation and be right here, right? But let's say that they are now living in the district, they've enrolled in a private school and they're not participating, or they're living in the district, they've enrolled in the public school, but they're still not participating, the cessation of services, right? But they could start participating because they're still eligible. So that's a student arrives, and then basically once we learned that they were not going to stay in the public school and they went to a private school, we would make them inactive in SIRAS as of the day we got the notification, and then we report that inactive status is eligible, not participating, cessation of services, but they're still eligible, remember. Now let's say the kiddo comes in and they don't want to participate, but not only that, they're actually withdrawing eligibility. So in that case, now there is no offer of FAPE that they could launch into orbit and be participating. If there's any mention of special ed, they would have to be referred again. So there's nothing here in the doc. It's just basically they're just not eligible, right? And that's what this would look like. In CalPADS, you'd have a SWIDS 4 of not eligible. Okay. Oh, and then also make sure that you're getting the PWN signed and uploaded into SIRAS. You want to document those communications with the family. Okay, when students are leaving, we need to make sure that this is the spreadsheet I referred to earlier. Remember, I said there's a spreadsheet of appropriate reasons. You can click on this, and it will give you a look. Let's see. Oh, I guess I can't look when I'm presenting. But basically, that was that thing where on the left-hand side, it's going to have all the exit reasons. On the right-hand side, it's going to have a SWID status. So it's going to let you know if it thinks it should be SWIDS 2 or SWIDS 3 or SWIDS 4. But essentially, if you use SIRAS, if you look at our two PowerPoint things that will eventually go to Happy Fox, but this is a PowerPoint on when we're making them inactive. And this spreadsheet indicates that we do need to report a change in status. So that's when we make records from active to inactive, we need to report. But then there's also situations where if you look on the spreadsheet, the exit reason on the right corresponds to an unchanged SWIDS 1. So that would be like moved and known to be continuing. We don't need to archive those because we don't need to send a change in eligibility status. We don't need to change a change in participation status. So these two PowerPoints are useful. And then here's my overall guidance on making a record inactive in SIRAS that you can review later. So exiting SWIDS, how do we do that? So you click on active and you change it to inactive, and then use the CalPADS exit reason for guidance on what type of inactive we're making it in SIRAS. And typically we will align the inactive date in SIRAS with the exit date in CalPADS, right? So let's say that we got a kiddo who arrived on 3/21, but then as of shortly thereafter, we got a notification from the parents that they were going to withdraw. And so while the student's still enrolled in the public school, they withdrawn, and we've had to report the change of status. So they're inactive in SIRAS now, but still active in your SED system. All right, so now we're on to the audits, right? So what type of audits are you going to want to do, or reports? Like this is where your director says, hey, I need to know how many active kids we had in April. Or, hey, what was so-and-so's case count last September? Well, we suggest that you do, now this is a local decision, depending on what type of data you need to research over the course of the year. Minimally, you're doing extracts on census data. That's the Census Day Search and Store, where you do it on Fall 1, which is the first Wednesday of October, or you can do it on June 30th. But what about other reports during the year? So if someone says to you, hey, I need to know how many active students we had last April. Well, if you are doing monthly data extracts, like using the student data or service data, and you did an extract on the first of the month every month, or the end of the month, right? So if you needed all the students who were active in April, as of April 1st, right, you could actually do your extract to say, yeah, as of April 1st, you could find all the active students in this file and you know exactly, right? What if you're doing provider lists, right? Well, if you're going to do provider list, the student data will tell you the case manager and has one box that has all the providers listed, but that's not really easy for reporting on. So if you do need to have tracking of caseloads throughout the year, we suggest that you create a custom list of all the provider types with student, and then you combine it with the student data. You have do both of them, but minimally have like in the provider list, the name, SSID, school, whatnot. But then you do this extract um, monthly as well. So then if somebody says, hey, I need to know how many students this particular speech language person had assigned in February of 2025. Well, if you went in February 2025, ran this list, went to, and remember, saved lists are saved exports, right? So if you save a list and you go there, you can actually load this list as your export. And then the export that you did at the beginning of February or maybe the beginning of March, if you want to use March to include all of February, you could open that up and then you can filter on that SLP person and then you can see how many kiddos they had. And then if you have the service data from that month, you can actually look and see, what minutes maybe they had. All right. So while we don't have super easy ways to do it in live data right now, I mean, you can find this stuff from live, but if you want to look at it in past data, SIRAS is designed about what's happening today. So if you want to look at what happened a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, needed to have to get today's data out of SIRAS when it was 2 months ago. So if you're getting data out of SIRAS today every month, then you have that data of like what was it look like in 2 months ago, 3 months ago, a year ago. That's what's going to help. And so if you want to do service minutes reports, make sure you're doing, all three of these. If you need to do provider list, then do student data, do service data every month, or at least quarterly, and then do a provider list at the same time. And this is where the X VLOOKUP can come in handy as well. Because here's the thing, because if you do an extract of student data, let's say February 1st, it's possible that students who were listed as active on February 1st may have left at the end of January in your student's information system, but the student hadn't been made inactive in SIRAS yet. So keep that in mind that if there's a delay between students are enrolled in your SIS and when they're made active in SIRAS, or if there's a delay in when students are made inactive in your SIS or have left in your SIS and then made inactive in SIRAS, that's going to affect these audits, right? And so by having enrollment data from your SIS, you can actually take the data that you're extracting monthly and really hone in on it and see what actually is relevant for your reports, right? Because you can't if you just do the student data and all the actives from February in SIRAS, it may be that all the students that are listed as active may not have been active on that date. You'd have to compare it to your SIS data. Okay, enrollment help. Okay, so this is a number of things we're going to go over. Just as a reference, in these screenshots, these are links to the FAQs. We get the questions about which students need SSIDs. Do you have to create an enrollment to get the SSID? So these links are here for the FAQ. What's the minimal information you need to get an SSID? But when it comes down to it, when a student's having a referral, we can't, if someone says, oh, a student's having a referral, therefore we have to do an enrollment on the parent consent date. Well, there's some context to that because if a student already has an SSID and they're already enrolled, and then they're getting a referral, we don't have to do another enrollment on the parent consent date because they already have enrollment. The whole point in verifying that they have enrollment is so that we can report records to CalPADS. Now, typically this comes up for infants and preschoolers. Infants and preschoolers may not have an SSID, or if they do have an SSID, they may not be enrolled at the time. So if there's a referral coming through and they're not already enrolled, or they don't already have an SSID, then minimally we need to get that SSID, and we do have to have an enrollment in order to report something like a pending as of that may include a meeting delay reason. So this is the guidance on when you would you would enroll the kiddos if they don't already have an SSID and enrollment. Typically, the pivot point is once you get parental consent for assessment, then you're required to minimally have an SSID or have that in one-day enrollment to be able to turn in the results of the referral. And if they're not eligible or they're eligible not participating, then what we do is then we would have a one-day no-show enrollment where the enrollment start and end date is the parent consent date, and that allows us to report a pending as of. If that's the only thing we report during the current year, and then if they are found eligible, not participating, we can then report that as well. with that same enrollment. And then having that enrollment during the academic year is what's going to get those kiddos on your non-participation list. So there's a couple of things to think about when we're doing the referrals, and this is for all referrals, but initial evaluations need to be reported in a timely manner. So the initial evaluations do have several steps. So, but what happens when the several steps are happening towards the end of the year, right? Um, so once we get parental consent, if parental consent is the only thing we're going to get before the end of June 30th, then we have to turn in a pending as of record, regardless. If the meeting happens to be overdue when it's held next year, well, that pending as of can contain that school break reason for the meeting delay reason. Now, if the meeting's delayed over summer because of a settlement agreement or something with the parents, you can use a different meeting delay reason in that case. Once the meeting date's scheduled and then held, you may not be able to close it right away. You may need to document the attempts at getting a signature. Because once you do that, if your district's going to have, if you don't know what your district's procedures are, make sure you find that out. There should be some set thing where it's like, you need to attempt to contact the parents in writing 3 times, something about a phone call, whatnot, but it has to be documented, maybe even registered letters. I don't know, whatever your local district says. But once you meet that criteria, then in a timely manner, then you will be able to close that meeting, even if it does not accept the plan or partial consent to goals, whatever that is. But we want to get these meetings closed in a timely manner. Otherwise, it's going to make reporting them harder. You might have compliance issues coming up because they think you're overdue on something. But anyways, let's go over some of these things. So let's say parent response, they do not accept the plan, right? We looked at the eligibility. Remember earlier in the presentation, we talked about, do they even consent to the eligibility at all? Let's assume that they consent to the eligibility, but they don't want to accept the offer of FAPE. Or it could be that this is an end of, yeah, so they're not accepting the plan, right? So that's where we can do eligible, no plan, declining FAPE. Or if we did determine that they were not going to accept the eligibility, we would turn that in already. But let's just do the simple one. They're not agreeing to FAPE, right? So let's just say everything happens during this academic year. You got parent consent, the meeting happens, they consented to the eligibility, but they declined FAPE. So then we report a non-participation status, right? So that means we report the meeting that happened and we report the SWIDS too. There's no plan involved. So let's say they don't accept the eligibility. Well, this is what this would look like, right? You had the parent consent, you had the meeting date, and they didn't give consent for the initial provision of eligibility, even though they might have been found eligible. You just report not eligible, SWIDS 4. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Let's say you had that parent consent, and but the meeting's going to happen the next academic year. Well, minimally, you have to turn in a pending as of. And CalPads can track these for years and years because they're not giving any errors now. But if it ever comes up where this is actually was the result of a lawsuit where somebody made an allegation, hey, we're having all these parent consents and we're not having these meetings. So that was part of the requirement. So if CalPads ever wanted to, they could actually go in and find all the records where an initial evaluation happened one academic year, and they can tell in that date when the parent consent happened. If they see the parent consent happened the previous year, that could be an automatic dink. And if they add up, where if you're not consistently doing these, even though you are holding the meetings, maybe you're holding on time, it may look like you are not sending these. Well, they can't get intent, but if you're not sending these regularly, that might put a flag on your district where say, hey, they're regularly not sending these pending ASOs at the end of the year. We need to go in and look because that seems like a red flag to them. So please make sure you're sending these pending ASOs, right, for the initials once you get the parent consent. Now, here's something else that could happen, right? Let's see, let me go back. So there's really not, so the meeting's open. This is a meeting where you're gonna leave it open over summer. There's just nothing you can do. You don't necessarily need to close this type of meeting. You don't do this as unresolved. You just have to manually advance it after the meeting happens. Now, here's something that could happen. This is when we have the end of year initials where there is agreement. They agree to the eligibility and they agree to the plan, but they're not starting the plan until next year. So what happens is we have to close out the meetings this year as of non-participation reason, as in we had the meeting, they're in agreement, but they're eligible, no plan, And the reason is future start date. So we need to close these meetings out this year. Make sure that the plan effective date is in the next year, whatever the first day of school is, before you're closing the meetings. Sometimes I see the staff, they're closing in this way, but they're leaving the plan effective date a day after the meeting date, which then sets the service start date. So are they checking the service start dates to make sure that the service start dates are indicating when the first day of school is? If they're not, it doesn't hurt anything, but it's better if they do because then it's clear, right? And then in fall, we have easy ways to make the record active once we confirm they've enrolled, update the district enrollment date, and then we archive the active record. So then the inactive record that was done now is followed by an active record in fall, and the SIRAS will automatically know to report a SWID 1 for you, which is that change of participation status we talked about. Okay, here's another scenario where it literally report almost the same thing, but it's totally different. Where we have parent consent, we have the meeting date, you're doing contact attempts, and we don't get an agreement on anything, right? Well, let's just say that we assume that they did indicate that they're agreeing with the eligibility. We just could never get any agreement on the plan. So we have to report this as eligible, not participating due to declining FAPE, simply because we couldn't get a signature on that. We just want to make clear that we did have consent for the eligibility, though. If we don't have consent for the eligibility, then we have to turn it in as not eligible. But then let's just say we finally get agreement in the next year, then we can make the record active and then report it then. So we can report. So technically speaking, it looks similar to when we had agreement as a future start date. In this case, it just happened to be a future start date because the district followed up. But again, so this would be like open another review. And if, let's just say you do the other review, this is the situation where the record is currently inactive, right? But let's just say you want to have another review with the hopes that they'll start participating. If you don't know they're going to start participating, then you make the record pending. Remember I earlier showed make it record pending, but you leave this inactive reason in place. And then if it's clear during the course of the other review, or even if it's a plan review, that they are going to participate, well, then you can go in and clear out the inactive status and make the record fully active. Or actually, you don't have to do that. As long as they do accept the plan, SIRAS will automatically make the record active for you. If they don't accept the plan, then it's important that we already have that inactive reason left in place, because then if they don't accept the plan, then we're not going to report anything new because the status is still the same. Here's another one, late non-agreement, kind of a thing where let's just say that we, at the meeting, it was clear that they're okay with the eligibility, but we just couldn't get any consensus on whether or not they're going to start participating on a plan or not. So, and that's the same way, we still have to report declining FAPE, even though we haven't got it signed yet. They just said, oh, we need time to think about it. And then once you actually got back together with them next year, they said, actually, no, we're not going to do the FAPE at all. And then you confirmed it, but there's no change because we already reported that. Okay, so enrollment procedures. Is the enrollment for actual attendance in a public school? Then if we already have that, then that enrollment already will allow us to report the records, right? If the enrollment's just for referral and they won't start participating, then we can close that enrollment as an N470 exit reason. Is the enrollment only for referral and the student may or may not attend depending on the results, then we can open the enrollment as the parent consent date, and then depending on the results of the meeting, we can adjust the enrollment from there on out. So this is the one where there's two ways to approach this. Let's just say that you had an enrollment for referral only and the student will start participating immediately. You have two options, right? You can close that parental consent enrollment as of the same day with the M470 and then open a new enrollment for when they actually start participating, right? Actually start attending. Or you can modify the original enrollment and just have only one enrollment left over when they start participating. Now, the thing is about that, what if you're in this situation right here? So if you have an enrollment from this academic year, but they're not going to start participating until the following academic year, and you use this enrollment as of the parent consent date to report a pending as of with the meeting delay reason, I highly suggest that you close this in fall when we come back, this parent consent enrollment, the 1-day enrollment, the N470, as suggested by right here, right? That's going to be listed like this. So when you come back the next year, what we suggest doing is leaving this one in place. Don't overwrite it. Now, technically you could, but if you do, my fear is that in doing so, this one, if you overwrite that 1-day enrollment with the academic year from the next year, then uh, I don't know if that's going to affect any of your older reports. So we suggest leaving the old one in place and just building onto it. Although technically speaking, you could recycle it, but I don't. That'd be a question for CalPATS, right? So when the events are spanning more than one academic year, I hesitate against you recycling older enrollments. Just build new enrollments to meet the need. That's the main point right here. Because when you're seeing it, like some people may go, oh, we don't need this anymore. Like, well, what if it's within the same academic year? Well, maybe it doesn't matter, right? But it's hard to give guidance on this because it really depends on, you know, what you guys are doing. Like, are they actually in a preschool or not? Are they in a private school? So this we'll leave this up to you and CalPADS, but let's just say that we have a kiddo who had an initial last year. I know these dates are old, and then they started the next coming year. So the initial happened before the end of year then, and then they started coming back, right? So in SIRAS, we already had them as eligible no education plan future start rate, right? It's future start date. So when they come back, we just need to build onto this, right? So what the current switch status is going to show you the June meeting, eligible not no plan, other reason, which is future start date. So when they come back in August, this next after summer, then we just make the record active, put in the district enrollment date, the August or September date when the first day of school is, and then we archive it. And then you can see there's a progression. And then this will actually, once you save it and archive it, that's going to report a new status, right? So the old status is still there, but then we report the new status of eligible participating once they come back from summer. Let's say you had an initial and they're going to participate on an ISP. You may have already opened up a 1-day enrollment as a parent consent, maybe with a private school. I've given up trying to advise on this. People are gonna, there's many different ways to approach it. But typically, if you have the parental consent enrollment, this is how we would envision it, but you don't have to do it exactly like this. You could say that you enrolled them at the district level enrollment as of 1 day, and they end up going to a private school. And then this new private school enrollment, this should not be in alignment with when you know they enrolled at the private school. This enrollment start date needs to align with the plan effective date of when they started participating on the agreed to ISP plan. That's an important point. So an open private school enrollment implies that they are on an ISP plan. So if you're ever using private school enrollment to just get an SSID, make sure you're closing that down as the same date. And then don't start an actual open enrollment on the private school until they're on the ISP plan. Now, what if they're already on an IEP? Well, then you have your normal public school enrollment at the bottom there when they started, and then the last day they attended, and then you do the EXRES and T180. And then you should have a corresponding plan review in SIRAS to report the change of plan type. And then the plan effective date of the plan, the private school enrollment should start the plan effective date of that annual review. Let's say they're going from ISP to IEP. So let's say they're enrolled at the private school and they've been on an ISP since they whenever that start date was, and then the exit date is whenever they leave. And then once they're on the IEP, you can just start the enrollment date whenever. That's an easy one. But make sure that you're doing a plan review in order to change the plan type from ISP back to IEP. Okay, errors and warnings. Now, all right, so I have, it's in progress, but it's kind of a conceptual page on how to solve errors and warnings, the process for it. That's right here. Specific error resolutions right here. This is our Padlet I have a list of GERs or a list of errors on the left and then possible scenarios and solutions there. But basically, just know the story of what you're reporting, right? Um, is there bad data? Is there missing data from a story in CalPads and replace it by sending data from SIRAS? Was there bad data sent from SIRAS, or did somebody manually enter something in CalPads? Something is wrong in CalPads and we may need to remove it, right? Typically, that's going to be what is going to solve errors by getting the stories straight. So we have the tools in SIRAS to be able to send missing SWIDs, missing meeting, missing plan. Typically, if procedures are being followed correctly, SIRAS automatically reports everything we need. But at the end, but if there's anything missing, we can use tools to open up a plan review and resend a meeting with a new meeting delay reason. We can open up a plan adoption and potentially send a SWIDs record or the most recent IEP date. Lots of tools at our disposal, right? But once the correct story has been told, that should resolve the errors, right? So let's say that there's a missing SWID status, right? That, adding the missing SWID status will solve a plan 620 or a meet 624. Or maybe you got a SWID 605, right? Adding a missing meeting record will solve that. Adding a plan adoption will solve an SCNR 606, right? So SCNR 606 is that if you have them enrolled and they have a SWID status of 1, then minimally you need a recent plan. That might be a plan adoption, right? Maybe a student came back from an absence and they just had a leftover SWIDS 1 and you enrolled them, and this plan is from 2 years ago. Well, you might need to add a new plan, right? 624 is missing status record. 673 is eligible participating and they're not enrolled, right? So I don't know if this is going to be left in place because there might be a lot of students for a lot of districts where they left last year and they left in a way where participation wasn't indicated as changing and they're still SWIDS 1. They might come back as errors. I don't know. Yeah, currently disabled. Um, but if they do turn it on, it would be a big can of worms. So I think you're going to leave this one off. But this goes back to when we have kiddos that are leaving, we want to make sure that we're properly making them inactive and reporting it. So if they move out of state, we need to report that. Those kind of things, right? Plan 390 to 397, this is the missing transition indicators. Now, keep in mind that this particular error, Plan 390, 397, this is related to blank information for TranReg for a student who's 16 or older as of the census date. Now, the resolution is to turn in values for these. Now, let's just say the student turned 16, typically the annual before they should have filled out the post-secondary. Now, if you're getting these errors on a student that should have had them filled out, typically we don't recommend the SEDS coordinator fill them out on the MI summary page. We suggest you reach out to your staff, have them do an amendment to fill them out. But what if something's happening where a student arrived after an absence? So they left the state before they turned 15 and they come back to your district after they turned 16. So they're technically arriving with no plan TranReg filled out. So if that's the case, if you're solving a 606, SCNR 606, because you have a plan adoption, and you're making the MI summary page look like the incoming IEP, it's perfectly acceptable to fill out no for all the TranRegs, simply to get rid of the plan 0390 errors. Because you're saying when they arrived at our district, they weren't filled out. So having them all filled out as no, it's not a compliance issue. It's just being honest about the status. So we fill them as no. But then now that they're 16, then the goal would be to have the post-secondary information filled out, the transition indicators during that 30-day. And then with the plan comes through from that 30-day, it's going to resolve those errors further down the road there. 439E4, this is for kiddos that are in 12th grade. The essence of it is that if they're in their first year of 12th grade, it's going to be a no here in the enrollment record, right? But if they're in their second year of 12th grade, then this would be yes. But not applicable is what's giving you the error. Okay, looks like we got 2 questions in the chat possibly. Oh, that was at 10:20. Armando, yeah, let's bring that one up. What was the question?
It was regarding the pending status, if that was
Oh,
the
yes.
same for triennials.
Yeah, so let's just say that you have a student, they're eligible for IEP, maybe they're on an IEP recently or they arrived eligible, but at the end, but what happened is they've gone to a private school and they've let you know they're not withdrawing eligibility, but they're saying they're stopping services because they're cessation of services. So you got that PWN, you've made the record inactive in Cyrus as cessation of services. Now it's a year later or it's 3 years later and the triennials due. Well, technically speaking, you don't, CalPADS is not going to hold anyone to account for overdue triennials or annuals while the student's not participating. But based on your local district practices, through self-advice or the GLASS agreement or parent request, yeah, you may have an annual or a triennial. So if that's the case, you would make the record pending, like we've shown, open the triennial, do the triennial, and then when you close it, if they still don't accept the plan and they're not, so if they're going to accept, if they're going to start participating, you say parents accept the plan. If they're not going to start participating, you say parents don't accept the plan. And then depending on that parent response, if they say they do accept the plan because they are going to participate, Cyrus will make the record active and report the triennial and then the new plan and the new status actually of participation. But however, if you have the triennial and the parents are like, yeah, that's great, but no, thank you. We're still not going to participate. Then you indicate parents don't accept the plan, and then Cyrus knows to only report that meeting, even though you're not being held accountable for it being late or not. But it will report it, right? If they ever do start participating later on, it's good to have the history. But no plan will be sent because you couldn't send a plan anyways because there's no enrollment, and you would get a G arrow 5 anyway. So yeah, that's a great question, Armando. Sorry I didn't bring that up earlier, but it does apply
Uh,
for both annuals and tries.
that's what if they don't sign, but in the meeting they've said that they're not they're needing time to consider it, or they're just avoiding
Well,
altogether.
yeah, well, hey, that's unfortunate, but if that's the case where your staff go through the efforts of having a full trial and say, hey, we got a great plan, we really help the kiddo, and you can't even get them to sign it, um, goes back to a local procedure, but technically speaking, you could say they don't accept the plan. Unless you get a signature, you're inferring now by lack of participation in the process and lack of saying, hey, thank you for doing all that, but no, thank you. We're going to just disagree with it. If they're not going to sign it, and you've gone through the documented attempts of trying to reach out for that signature and they still are not working with you, you can infer that they're not accepting the plan because if they accepted the plan, they would let you know. They would sign something. So by not signing something, by not returning your contacts, you're basically inferring that they're not accepting the plan. I wouldn't go so far as saying that you're inferring they don't accept eligibility. The time that we can infer they're not accepting the eligibility is at the time of the initial. If you can't get them to say in the meeting to your staff, or at least indicate on the forms that they agreed to the initial, but not to the plan. If you can't get any signatures at all from an initial, then we kind of have to default that they're not even acknowledging the eligibility. So if they're not even acknowledging it, then you kind of have to assume that they may not you can't if you're not getting that consent for the initial consent for initial provision of eligibility during an initial with no signatures at all, then as far as I understand from Brandy and this new guidance is that without a signature on that, you can't report them as eligible, which is a bit of a flip because that's now kind of it's an opt-in, right? Whereas before we actually had this non-participation reason, if they didn't accept the plan, we just said, okay, well, we're just assuming they accept the eligibility. We didn't really have a way to report that they weren't accepting the eligibility, but now we do. So, and
Does
the assumption is during a triennial is that they've already accepted the eligibility, and now we're just negotiating a plan. Now, if they don't like the Excel eligibility at all, they can let you know and they can withdraw. But that's different than the 27 from the initial. Withdrawals means they've been eligible, but now they're no longer eligible because the parents have let you know that they're withdrawing. But we would need something in writing for that. What else is going on? We're halfway to Friday,
I think
right?
I'm going to pause our recording and
Okay.
say thank you so much to everyone. And oh, look at that. It's so adorable. So cute.
My
It-
little, yeah, I just be, for anybody who's watching this later, I just want to say thank you for what you're doing, working in the school district and anybody involved in the education system. I salute you. And I thank you for your service for working with these kids.
And thank you, Brian, so much. I'm going to pause our